As I showcase my AV setups here, both in my living room and in the home theater, I talk about what I'm doing, vlog on the channel, and go into detail about like what I choose to buy, brands and models and things that I like to use. I also go into a lot of detail about how I hook things up, how I'm using things. And that fosters a number of questions that I fielded in the comments, specifically about routing sources, video streamers, cable boxes, and video game hardware, and that sort of things. Because I made mention in my videos how specifically in the living room here, I go through the television. I switch and I route through the television first, and then I carry on the audio to my external audio system. I do it differently in the theater. I actually run all of my sources into a preamplifier, equivalently, let's say, a receiver for that purpose. The video sources switch there, and then there's a single video connection out to the projector. Now, I do that deliberately differently in both zones for very specific reasons. And again, it's fostered a lot of questions about, should I do this? Which one should I do? Should I run the stuff through my receiver? Should I run the stuff through the television? So I'm happy to answer those types of questions in the comments, but I figured, hey, great topic for a video. So let's go into some detailed discussion about this, and hopefully this will give you some guidance if you're hooking up your system, setting your things up, why the pros and cons, benefits, and reasons why you may want to use one or the other, why in fact you may be forced to end up using one method or the other. So in my living room here, I effectively run 4 sources, generally speaking. I have an Apple TV 4K. I do have the Kaleidoscape ran to this zone as well. So 2 video sources and then 2 gaming sources. Nominally speaking, let's call it the Nintendo Switch and the gaming PC. I know in some of the recent content I've talked about a PlayStation, but for the purposes of this discussion, let's focus on Apple TV, Kaleidoscape, Switch, and gaming PC. All of those sources run directly into the LG G2 television behind me. The LG television has 4 HDMI ports, one of which is shared as the HDMI audio eARC port, but that's it. That's all you get. So one of the things right away to keep in mind, if you're going to run sources through your display rather than through a receiver or some type of external switcher, keep in mind you may be limited actually by the number of devices that you can hook up. A lot of receivers, preamplifiers might actually go up to 7 inputs, whereas televisions nowadays seem to top out at 4. Thankfully, this works for me. I've got 4 sources, I've got 4 inputs, just enough to fulfill the needs. Now, one of the other really key elements of why I do this is because my audio processor piece for the living room here is an Anthem STR. It's not an AVM Anthem, it's not an MRX, it's not a receiver per se. It's a 2-channel specific audio processor. And as such, you'll find in a lot of cases that 2-channel audio elements, they don't switch a lot of HDMI. They don't just seem to naturally come with a lot of HDMI input. So in my setup, if I really wanted to switch external to the television, I would have to add something else to the system to do the switching anyway. I just physically can't do it through the STR. So it takes that out of the equation to begin with. So that's one reason right there why you may use one method or the other, because of the ports and the capabilities of the devices that you're specifically using. However, there's one more element to it that I think is arguably the most important of why I prefer to do it this way in the living room, is that the settings on the television that I run are really very different between most of these sources. So the key element there is HDMI 1, HDMI 2 that are input with an Apple TV Kaleidoscape are kept in the television's cinema mode. They may have certain motion and judder settings and things enabled that are specific for video purposes, whereas the other HDMI ports dedicated to the Switch in the PC are kept in a gaming mode, and the related gaming features are used on those ports. And there's even some differentiation there. For example, the Nintendo Switch is at this point now kind of an ancient technological dinosaur, talking 1080p, SDR only. The Switch actually benefits from some other things that you can do in this LG television, for example, like super resolution and some of the video processing modes that I wouldn't want to have turned on when I'm using the PC that's completely capable of full native 4K resolution, HDR, and high frame rates. So I find it perfectly ideal then, 4 sources, 4 inputs, 4 discrete types of settings, and it all works great. If all of those 4 sources were switching through, say, a preamplifier or a receiver, there would be one HDMI connection from that switching audio device to the TV, and we would only be using one input on the television itself, it would either be stuck in singular modes or singular settings. Again, every time that I would want to change devices, I'd be mucking around in the menus, changing settings. I don't want to mess with it, and I guarantee the rest of the family, they don't even know what any of that stuff even means. So that leads me to the final kind of phase of the living room, which is how do I get the audio back to my audio system for these speakers and stuff here. That's where I use the optical connection. Most televisions have an optical audio output. They will take the audio input from the connected sources via HDMI, and if you're using optical in this way, generally speaking, would sample everything to a uncompressed PCM 2-channel audio signal and then send that out, either analog audio connections if your television might still have them, or better served, I think, optical for that connection. The STR downstairs does have an optical audio input, and so there we go. The TV feeds the audio to the STR, and I'm all set for easy access, perfectly set video and audio consumption here in the living room. And by doing this audio down mixing, because I have a 2-channel setup, I'm not losing anything. I'm not losing any bass. I'm not losing anything related to multi-channel because I don't have multi-channel, of course, in here. So the full range, uncompressed stereo audio signal is being decoded by the television digitally and output digitally over to the STR. There's no digital audio conversions unnecessarily in that chain, and I think it works just great. In the interest of showing as well as talking, we're looking here back behind the television. We can see the 4 HDMIs feeding into the TV. We've got Apple TV, Switch, PC, and then a 4th input, which is essentially the Kaleidoscape from downstairs. So some of these devices are local. The Apple TV and the Switch are both here right behind the television. Some of these sources I do keep down in the storage room with the rack in the basement, and they're connected over long fiber optic HDMI. Then we have here this kind of braided cable is the optical output that shunts that audio back down to the rack where the STR is and inputs the audio there. Per one of my prior videos, this is one of the great reasons the fact that LG televisions support Dolby Atmos means that even though I don't have a multi-channel setup in here, it's just a 2-channel system, excuse the mess, right? No surround speakers, no Atmos speakers in this room anymore, none of that. There's still quality value, fidelity value in having an Apple TV, for example, or particularly in this case, output as Dolby Atmos. It gets the higher quality source from the streaming cloud, essentially. The TV can decode the Atmos into just a 2-channel PCM. And again, everything rides along this optical cable, lossless, no unnecessary conversions, and full bandwidth, full frequency bandwidth audio fidelity. Now, as we come down here to the theater, things start to change. For the last while, I would say probably almost even the last year, perhaps a year and a half, I've really not had any major interest to actually play video games down here, just because the experience of gaming on the big LG OLED panel, VRR, high frame rates, and all that sort of stuff is so good. So historically, or for the longest time now, I've basically just been running video sources only here in the theater. And for me, that means 2 things, Apple TV and Kaleidoscape. So because the settings that I would be running in the projector, the JVC NX7 behind and up above me here, are congruent, they're parallel, they're the same effectively between using the Apple TV as a video source and using the Kaleidoscape as a video source, I don't have to worry about settings, options, configurations, stuff like that. I basically set up one input on the projector for all of the video related settings, everything that I want it to do for movies and TV shows and the like. And it doesn't matter whether I'm using the Apple TV or the Kaleidoscape. There's no value, there's no need, there's no reason to have the Apple TV and the Kaleidoscape independently connected via their own HDMI to the JVC. And in a theater environment, a projector environment, you wouldn't even want to do that necessarily anyway, because unlike a television, these projectors, they don't have any way to get the audio generally back to an audio system. So if you ran video source into a projector, you're done. That's an endpoint. The audio signal is not coming back, whereas televisions, by and large, still come, thankfully so, and I hope this is the case for a long while to come, televisions still come with those audio outputs. So down here, I'm perfectly content to take my video sources, my multiple video sources, run them both into HDMI 1 or 2 of the Anthem AVM90, my preamp, or if you had a receiver, it would be the same deal. let the preamp, let the receiver do the HDMI switching, and then run a single video cable on to the projector. The preamp gets the audio signals that it needs from the source devices, and the video signal carries on in the chain to get to the display device. So depending on your setup, you need to make this choice. Even if you're only using one source device, you still have to decide for yourself. Do you put it through your audio system components first, or do you put it into your video system component first? And I would say there is also a whole lot of like personalization that goes into this. It really does depend on specific factors about what is your source or sources, what are the capabilities of your display, what are the capabilities of your audio system, what kind of cabling and routing logistics do you have available to you. So I will say, if you're struggling with this, hey, Techthusiasm here, I offer consulting sessions. I'm more than happy to get on calls with folks. And if you've got system complications, you want some coaching, some system setup, configuration, logistics, and troubleshooting, we can go through the particulars of your deal. And I would tell you, hey, if it were me and I had these devices and this type of a setup, this is how I would be connecting them to make sure that we're always getting the best possible signals that we can, best possible fidelity and quality that we can. I would expect that the majority of the folks that are out there watching probably have multiple video sources, whether it's some combination of perhaps still a cable box, a streamer, a Roku, a Fire TV, an Apple TV, an NVIDIA Shield, something like that. You may have a disc player. You may have a local network media streamer like a Arvolution or a Zdo. You may have the Kaleidoscape. And as long as all those sources are consistent with each other in their purpose and what they're doing, i.e. movies and television show type content, video type content, you really have more flexibility. And it's kind of like 6 of one and a half dozen of another, whether you go through your audio system first or you go to your television. It's more of the physical, logistical elements that I think will have you decide what to do rather than anything more technical. Honestly, it's really a matter of when you start to introduce gaming systems and you've got some gaming stuff and you've got some video stuff, and wanting all of those things to work properly to the best of their ability, to the highest of their fidelities, that it becomes a bigger consideration. Do keep in mind though, as a lot of folks may watch the videos and kind of look to pattern off of what I do, remember that the fact that I use the optical connection from the television in the living room to the STR only really works because my system is a 2.2 audio system in that room. If you have a multi-channel audio system, you don't want to be doing the optical thing that I'm doing, because you won't be able to have high fidelity or lossless quality multi-channel audio, Atmos audio, and all of that getting back to your audio system. In that case, your choices would be route those sources through your audio system, preamplifier, receiver first, and then onward to the television. Or if you're going to put your sources into your television, know that you're going to lose one of those HDMI ports on the TV, because you're going to want to use the HDMI eARC port from the television back to the receiver. So now you're limited on most TVs to 3 sources. That may still be enough. Maybe you've got an Apple TV, you've got a Blu-ray player or something like that, and you've got one gaming system. Well, hey, perfect. Put them all into that television, set up those inputs as we've been talking about discretely for the type of source they are, and you've got one left over, HDMI eARC, back to your receiver, and you're good to go. I do want to mention one other thing that gets left on the table by doing stuff the way that I'm doing it, and that's the fact that the optical connection that's going from the television to the SDR can only carry that audio signal. There's no HDMI CEC, which means that there's no automatic power state control or communication then between the television and the STR. There's no volume control between them either, which is really, to me, the main unfortunate loss. CEC can be bothersome, and I've got a Control 4 system, so I don't want to have a whole lot of CEC kind of mucking with the state and the control of the things that are in my system. Control 4 is largely doing that for me, but I would really, really love to be able to have an HDMI connection running there, whereby I could use the Apple TV remote and volume up and down would go from the Apple TV through the television to the STR, and be able to control it over that HDMI connection that way. So I don't get any of that. The optical connection is not a data connection. That's why in other content here on the channel, you've heard me mention or reference the idea that I have an IR, a little IR eye taped up underneath my TV, and an IR signal that comes down and goes in to the STR, and I use the Apple TV remote to control volume of the STR via IR. If in fact a new model of an STR or some future two-channel processor that I may get actually does have HDMI input, I'm going to be in a little bit of a quandary, because in some respects I would like to take advantage of that rather than optical. However, I've got 4 sources. I don't really see myself changing away from using those 4 sources. So my HDMI eARC port is full. I'd have to do some other finagling, but we'll see. Who knows? Who knows what the future may hold and what future devices may actually be in there. One other item to note, as I have been talking a little bit lately because of all of the great theater upgrades that have gone in here, Revelation chairs, I got the new subwoofers, 4 subwoofers, got the AVM90, all that stuff going on in the theater. I have had a little bit more of a draw to want to come down here and actually play some video games. If I did that, I would be stuck with some of the hassle points, the pain points that I've been talking about, meaning I'd have a couple video sources and I'd have some gaming sources switching through the AVM90 with my system right now feeding on one HDMI connection to the projector. For the JVC NX7, I don't think the optimal settings are really too different between video and gaming. I think I could get away with that. However, I think in the JVC NZ projector generation, and perhaps in some of the other newer units that are out there, much like a television, I probably will want to be doing some different input settings between watching movies and playing games. So my solution to that is the fact that most projectors do have actually more than one HDMI input. Preamplifiers and receivers, including the AVM90, do actually have 2 main zone HDMI outputs as well. So what I would intend to do then is basically run 2 HDMI cables from the AVM90 to the projector, continue to switch my sources through the AVM90, the Apple TV, the Kaleidoscape, the PC, whatever, and I would have Control 4 sort that out. So if I'm using the Apple TV and Kaleidoscape, I'll configure HDMI 1 on the JVC for all of the proper video settings, and I will set the projector to HDMI 1, or Control 4 will do it for me when I'm using a video source, and then I will configure HDMI 2 on the projector, optimized for gaming, and when I'm using one of those gaming sources, I will have my control system put the JVC projector into HDMI 2. And the AVM90 keeps both of those ports live. You don't specifically have to switch or choose the output port of the AVM90. You just have the control system set the input selection, and then have the JVC also do its similar input selection. And then I can have very discrete settings running in that projector for gaming and for video. If I do pull off, or when I pull off an NX7 to an NZ or some future successor model, rest assured we'll definitely be talking about that here. Optimal settings for gaming in a projection-based theater setup. So I hope this video didn't lose too many folks. I'm kind of talking through a lot of technical concepts here. I think if you're an advanced DIY person, you probably understand a variety of these concepts and you're executing them for specific reasons in a certain way in your rooms and in your spaces. But for folks that are maybe getting started or trying to figure some stuff out, I hope this was helpful and not a little overbearing. Hey, if you have to, watch it a couple times. It's YouTube. You can scroll back, roll back, and listen to me kind of explain some of these concepts again. If you have any questions, ask in the comments. And again, if you need more direct help, I do offer the consulting sessions. I love to do them. They're a lot of fun, and I think folks have unanimously found a tremendous amount of value in doing them when they've had specific needs, specific questions, and whatnot to drive the conversation. So I'm going to leave it here. Thanks so much for watching. Come on back for more home theater discussion and fun.